Hi everyone, and welcome to Line of Fire. Well, new research buildings and parking garages are going up and being completed almost every day. One historic building on the UT Dallas campus is facing permanent closure due to a lack of sufficient funds. The UT Dallas Visual Art Farm may be closed down due to not only funding issues, but also safety concerns. Today, we're going to discuss why the university wants to close this building, as well as why students have been hanging their sweaters around the building and on the lampposts nearby, on today's episode of Line of Fire. I'm Stanley Joseph, and I'll be your host for today's episode. Panelists, I'd like to thank you for joining us today in discussing this important issue here in the art farm, which sadly may be one of the last times we'll all be together like this in this building. I'd like to take a moment to have each of you introduce yourselves.
I'm Nancy Fairbank, and I'm the Vice President of Student Government.
I'm Lauren Featherstone, and I'm the former Editor-in-Chief of the Mercury.
I'm Jennifer Burris, and I am an artist and getting my bachelor's in arts and performance.
I'm Cynthia Sadoff, and I have a BS and MIS. I graduated in 2002 from UTD, and I'm working on an MFA currently.
All right, well, thank you for joining us here today. So, let's face it, UTD pumped in about $60 million to build the new Edith O'Donnell Arts and Technology building, right? But unfortunately, that building does not have the resources that the art farm currently does. Cynthia, Jennifer, what are some of the, specific things that the Arts and Technology building lacks that the art farm has?
I can address that. It lacks, I know that the sculpture room, that the electrical load in the sculpture room will not handle our woodworking equipment, as well as there are no sinks in the printmaking room, and you cannot print make without a sink. That's just a couple of the things. Do you want to elaborate?
Well, there's no real studio space for us to really get messy and experiment with the mediums that we, work with. Anything from, animal fibers and wool to paint and photography. And without, the large or the span of the different studio spaces we have here, is like the wood shop, sculpture room, we have painting studio, we have this studio where myself, Cynthia, and our colleague Lance collaborate to create artwork together. And then we have the printmaking and photography area. Aside from that, the O'Donnell building really lacks a sufficient gallery space. We have an established gallery here. The surrounding area, the Dallas community, especially the Dallas art community, knows the art barn and knows our gallery space, and we have a pretty good turnout every time we have a show here.
I'm also understanding in the gallery space at the new O'Donnell building that you're not allowed to put a nail in the wall. And so that really limits the kinds of shows that could go on in there. Like things have to be wired from the ceiling.
I would not be able to show in the O'Donnell building. I have to be able to install screws into the wall in order to hang my artwork. And there's no way for me to install artwork and do my installations without this space.
Right. And so obviously there are many things missing from the O'Donnell, but that's a very important part of displaying artwork, which makes us, a lot of student body wonder why, in planning this incredibly massive building, no one thought to put in these features. I know, Lauren, you have been following both the faculty as well as the student perspective on this issue. Was there any issue as to why the O'Donnell building did not include some of these features?
I think that hasn't really been a concern. I know Dean Kratz has assured time and time again that these classes will happen in the fall and they will find a space for them. It's a different type of building, and I think some of it's still in progress. For what they see things that will be used as gallery space that may not be quite yet. It kind of had a soft opening. It's still growing and still finding uses in there.
So are there concrete plans in place to, build these spaces in the O'Donnell building?
Not that I know of. It might not even be in the O'Donnell building. There is a possibility of them finding temporary spaces elsewhere, which begs the question, why build a new space, when we have the space here that you could renovate? And so that's kind of the big question.
And I'm glad you brought up alternative spaces, because one of the alternatives mentioned in D Magazine was the Central Track building. And my understanding, that is a area where students, professionals are allowed to not only live but develop and display their artwork.
It is an artist residency, yes.
Would that be a potential alternative where students could display their artwork?
They really don't have a wood shop, first of all, and that is very, very far for arts and performance students or any student taking an art class, a serious art class, to have to travel in order to continue their education.
All right, so if we're not going to be able, if students aren't going to really be able to get to that alternative, I guess what would you like to see in the O'Donnell building specifically that you would find appropriate if the art farm was unfortunately torn down?
I don't even want to wrap my head around that, because I just don't think that should be. I mean, this structure has so many other attributes and qualities to it that I just can't even fathom tearing it down. So outfitting me with brand new facilities somewhere does not exactly make up for the fact that this is sort of a cultural icon. I mean, would you tear down the, yeah, exactly. There's something just about this space, and other alumni and students have commented. I don't know if you read Erica Stevens' commentary, but she just kind of, in a nutshell, described what it is like to be in this space, and there's nothing like it. We started a petition, and all the feedback that I get through the petition is all like, I made my first art here. I got noticed by
the issue feedback, because students have been always very vocal about the art farm. I don't know, how has student government received any complaints or concerns about the art farm?
So I think that student government hasn't really heard much from students. Just the reason being was that it was very close to summer that this occurred, and a lot of students left. But we have had some students that we actually went and tried to talk to in outreach, and as with many of us, they're upset about this development. I will say, though, that I was able to talk to the administration, and we found that they're not planning on actually tearing the art barn down. They're going to keep it up until they decide future plans, but right now they can't have students in the art barn simply because it's unsafe, and that's really why they're moving students out of the building, is for health and safety reasons. The mezzanine doesn't have a fire escape. There was a steel beam at one point that fell down that really could have injured or even killed a student. And so, because of those safety issues, it's just an unusable space as of right now.
Now, I take it that the art barn hasn't been having constant safety checks, or have they only had one?
No, they have had safety inspections regularly, as they have to do with all buildings. But now that they're getting to know some of these safety issues due to those very inspections, they have decided that they need to remove students from the space.
So we did have an inspection last year?
Yes.
Okay.
As far as I'm aware, yes, we did.
Now, Lauren, what is if they wanted to repair all the issues with the art barn, what cost would that be?
They haven't released a set number that I know of. There kind of were some rumored numbers going around.
One of those rumored numbers is, as of right now, like $4 million. Mm-hmm. And of course,
3 to 4. I've heard 3 to 4.
Dean Kratz told me that it would be 4, but that also if you spend a certain amount of money on renovating a space, you have to update the health and safety codes, and because the art barn was obviously made quite a while ago, they'd have to spend even more money to update and be in line with those health and safety codes.
Why haven't they been maintaining that all along?
So what was explained to me was that this building was not ever meant to be a permanent fixture on campus. They spent $1 million to build it, which is very cheap compared to a lot of the other structures going up now. It didn't even originally have air conditioning. And so it wasn't meant to be a long-standing building. It was just supposed to be a temporary fix.
I find that incredible, because Mark Lamster of the Dallas Morning News actually wrote an article about this building, and he actually underscored that this is a very important piece of architecture in the state of Texas. So whatever the safety concerns are in this building, I'm just appalled that they haven't been maintaining or keeping them up for all this year. I pay a lot of money in tuition. Where does that go? Who's making these decisions too?
Go ahead.
Go ahead and answer.
So in terms of making the decision, you mean to shut down the art barn?
Yeah.
So that was something that Dr. Daniel held a meeting on. He wanted to discuss what was going to be done with the art barn due to these health and safety issues. And then from there, facilities management took over to close down the art barn.
And were alumni or students ever invited to any of these meetings?
I don't think they were invited to the meeting on health and safety, but at the same time, I understand why. So if it was shutting down the art barn for other purposes, I think that it would have been very appropriate to have student involvement, as it always is, but I don't think that students can necessarily contribute on the health and safety factors.
When did this beam fall?
I believe it fell a few months ago, but I'm not exactly sure on that date.
I would find that incredible because I've been here maybe a year and a half and quite a bit, and I've never heard wind of anything like that.
I mean, I was told that luckily students weren't around at the time, so I don't really know much beyond that. But I do think
Do you know where it fell? Where was it?
I don't know where in the building it was. So I think that
interesting to know.
It's very important for another space or this space to be left for art students. But I do think the administration made the right decision in at least temporarily closing it if it was due to health and safety issues.
To my knowledge, it's not closed. I mean, I'm still here.
Right, we're in it right now, but in general, not having it as a teaching space or a classroom space.
What I would like to know is how much would it be to build us a new space or to set us up in a space that gives us everything that we could possibly need to make our art without, it won't have the aesthetic that this space does and the freedom to sort of make a mess without feeling like you're messing up a perfectly good building. But as opposed to fixing this building up, bringing it up to code and making sure it's completely safe.
I think that's a really good point, because, I mean, you mentioned that what they said 1 million was what this building was built as temporary, and that was cheap. So I think, 4 million, if that's really what it's going to cost for renovations, is, relatively pretty cheap compared to our 60 plus million dollar, if I'm citing that right, ATEC building and all of these other buildings, which are just, high up into so much more,
Yeah,
so I don't.
The O'Donnell building is a great building. It's perfect for what it was meant to do, which is arts and technology. The technology part really is the main part of that building, and it's perfect for that. It doesn't quite meet the needs of fine arts. It doesn't quite meet the needs of those of us that work with our hands as opposed to working on a computer. And that's just, it just doesn't quite suit that need. It doesn't mean it's a bad building, and it doesn't mean it doesn't have its, its place. It's not like it's not needed, but we need our barn.
It has a different purpose.
Are there any specific pieces of artwork that you've made that unfortunately couldn't be created elsewhere or can be displayed?
Actually, I have got a piece hanging in the gallery right now that we had a juried show just a few weeks ago, and I won Best in Show for sculpture with that piece. It's still hanging in the gallery. And there's no way I could hang that in the O'Donnell building.
Obviously, the art barn is very important to the arts and humanities students. There's no question about it. But the university overall is challenged with finding a balance between what the students in arts and humanities want, as well as what the university's overall goals are. To students who are art and humanities students, what would you say the benefit is to them of having this art barn on campus?
I would say the benefit is to be able to have a better understanding of the arts, because let's face it, in the world, who's supporting the arts? It's your scientists, it's your doctors, it's that level of giving that actually funds things like junior players or many of the NASHR or the DMA, any of these other organizations.
And without the arts, we wouldn't have the vision to, the outward vision and creativity that drives science to find new and better ways of doing things.
Is the opinion that Dr. Daniels or Dean Kratz has expressed?
So I talked to Dean Kratz specifically, and I absolutely think that he shares that opinion. He told me specifically that he was just fascinated with the interconnections between science and art, between music and science. And he also said, in terms of the overall goal of UT Dallas, it's to become Tier 1, that there's absolutely no way we can become a Tier 1 university without arts and humanities.
The art part is definitely going to be important for the future of the university. And one of the things students have always been very vocal about is their support of the building. And so I'd like to talk about for a brief second about Arms Around the Barn. Mm-hmm. I guess you could just describe how that movement came about, or what inspired it, and why you chose specifically wrapping sweaters and clothing around the building to show support.
Well, I've been working on a National Exchange project in Vickery Meadow, and as part of that, we were doing something called the Transknit. And I met an artist named Carol Zhu who is doing yarn bombing. So she started a group in Los Angeles. They've been written in the LA Times called Yarn Bombing Los Angeles. And she put a call out to artists to say, put a ring on it. So basically crochet or knit a ring around anything. It could be a concept or an idea that you absolutely love. And so this seemed like a natural thing. And we were already using and cutting sweaters on the Transknit to kind of make that an interesting point to sort of sell translation that project in Vickery Meadow to sort of the rest of Dallas. So it seemed like a natural fit to do here. It's also the end of sweater season. It seemed like everybody might have an old one that they're going to recycle for the next year. And it seemed also like a way to give a identity to, you know, sort of like a visual map of the support of this building, and then to embrace it in a protective hug. Exactly.
Has any of the administration taken notice or come down to see
of course.
Arms Around the Barn?
Yeah, Dean Kratz, was incredibly impressed by the art community coming together, and I think it really showed him and other members of the administration how much significance people place to this building, and really how much they care about it. I mean, UT Dallas can be an apathetic community at times, which is unfortunate, and this is one of the only projects that we've seen people really stand up for and speak about. So he definitely noted that significance and thought it was really a fantastic project.
And I'd like to note that the Art Barn isn't only significant for the artists in our community and in our school. It's also significant. We have musicians that come in here and play. Sometimes they just come in, set up, and jam, and people just walk through and enjoy good music. And sometimes we actually have, bands actually come in and play a show, just to get their music out there. And like the Anamanaguchi.
There were 300 people in here.
Yes.
Talked really nostalgically about one project where people came in and did graffiti art all over this
That's
building.
Luke Herndon's, yeah.
Yes, that's Luke.
And there used to be a group of kids that were neuroscience kids, because I asked them one day, what department are you in? And they're up there playing Pokemon in the mezzanine. And when finals rolled around, they put a bedroll out, because we had taken this downstairs. And, they would take a nap. And it just seemed to be a comfortable place for kids to come in and let off steam and just congregate, and to...
It is a welcoming place.
Yeah, completely.
The whole student body.
I mean, look at me. I have a Bachelor of Science from this institution, and here I am in this building. But people that don't make art at all come through this building just to hang out.
The potential.
A wide range of many places of love coming to the art.
Yes. Well, and there's a huge potential for this building.
Complete lack of support.
I don't know as much a lack of support, but from students we talk to, sure, there are students who aren't really aware of the Art Barn, who never had the reason to come in here. But I think it's also important to recognize that, times are changing, that while the campus is growing and expanding North Campus, this is becoming prime real estate. This is becoming an important place. When I started going here my freshman year, the Art Barn was really kind of out of the way. I was an art major and I hated coming out here because it was like isolated. But that's not happening anymore. We're getting the res halls up. We're getting the parking garage right there. So this location is going to become the center of campus, not anymore the outskirts of campus. And so I think that's important to recognize, and that is going to become a lot more visible and get a lot more traffic, whether it's the art barn here or another building here.
You know, it could possibly be considered almost like a gentrification.
That's exactly what I think. And I'm just looking at this poster that came out when this building was, launched, I guess, if you will. This does not say to me that this is a temporary building. I mean, this was modeled to be a very important piece of architecture. And it says it was nicknamed the Prairie Flower, and it was supposed to be likened to a college called the Black Mountain College, which is a very free-thinking institution, I think, to this day. So that's it's very culturally important. Some of the best artists of all times, Robert Rauschenberg came out of the Black Mountain College. But, I mean, that's what this was supposed to be. And you can't tell me we can just raise this to the ground. Update it, sure. Make it safe, fine. But don't just wipe it out of our history. Let's not be a transient school. Let's stick together.
We could watch movies on the side of the building. We could, have musicians come in and play. There's hangout spots. So it's almost like a student union, but more significant in the arts and more significant culturally, as far as, it being a very important piece of architecture.
Well, I definitely see that it is significant. However, it's also true that many students don't ever actually enter the art, especially
right. Well, and that's the importance of activating the space somehow.
Because I think it has been underused a lot. Definitely if people were wanting to keep this, we would have to see other things being used in it besides, just classroom space for sure.
And that's something that we brainstormed.
On Friday, we're going to have an opening also for Arms Around the Barn, because we are going to complete that. And so please come and check it out.
We're also having
7:30. There's going to be a band.
All right, now there's definitely potential at this space, but without a question, the updates have to be made to the building in order to help the safety code. And because of that cost, there's ultimately the outcome that this building is either completely shuttered to students, turned into a storage facility, or race the ground. And in that event, what do the arts and humanities students have to do to create art display?
Just won't be the same. I mean, that's the beauty of this open floor plan of this building, is I've actually learned some skills that I didn't have walking into this building. I mean, I've learned to crochet and knit and actually spin yarn. I've built spindles for her. I've never used a spindle. I'm learning just a drop spindle, but we're collaborating in ways we could not. When I walk around the ATEC building, doors seem closed. Like, I don't know what anybody's doing over there or where they're doing it. And there's also a lot of technology that happens in this building too. We have people programming Arduinos and doing all kinds of cutting edge things where there's space to do that.
Has there been any, contingency or backup plan on behalf of the faculty of this? Maybe we should put together some sort of alternative just in case that the building is raised. Have they put together any plan like that?
Well, first, I know that as of now, they're not going to just raise the building. They're letting it stand as is, not letting students take classes in it and things like that, but they're not tearing it down. They're trying to figure out what to do with it. I think that there are definitely differences with ATEC. I mean, it's obvious that this space is seen as somewhere you can get messy and you can screw things into the walls and you can paint on the floor. I mean, there are lots of very unique things about this building, but I do also think that there are benefits to ATEC as well. I toured the building the other day and it's gorgeous. They have a system set up where they have northern light exposure, so the light coming into the rooms, especially the painting gallery they set up there, is beautiful.
I've had classes in that painting room at the new building, and I will say that when we moved in, we were told, or we were asked by, I think it was Dean Kratz, I can't remember, it was one of the administration, to not make a mess. And so
anything on the floor.
They didn't want anything on the floor, so painting, when you're painting, you're bound to spill something at some point. So it was really, were we even allowed to actually paint in there?
What I'm really hoping for, and that the administration will back students on this, is that while it obviously can never replace the art barn, that students can begin to see it more of a home where you can start to make a mess. I know the administration is at least considering letting nails go into the wall in the gallery so you can actually hang the things that you need to hang. So I'm hoping that there will be leniencies made so that you can make it more of a home and begin to really move into it as a space more so than you can currently. And I know also they're developing the 3 rooms that you can create sculpture in, and they hired the head of sculpture from Savannah College, Andrew Scott, and so they're going to have a great sculpture program with digital fabrication that I think will be a benefit to our art students.
What about the plans that were put I'm sorry. Oh, okay.
Lauren, has there been any, support or concern on behalf of anyone outside the UT Dallas campus?
I don't know if I'm the best person to ask that because I work pretty much with UT Dallas. But I mean, I know people who haven't been here in a while, like alumni and stuff, have definitely been involved. And I don't know if you've had
people sign the petition as far away from like LA, New York. So
We've even heard from some alumni that they return every year to visit this building.
Mm-hmm. I guess, in your opinion, would UT Dallas lose anything significant if the art barn was not even raised, but just removed from student use?
Oh, of course. I mean, I think what's really important is we've discussed that they're trying to develop a culture with the Edith O'Donnell building, and that will happen. It's brand new. Like, of course, it's not going to have this big history that the art barn has because it's new. It'll develop its culture, but I'm sure it'll be completely different than the one here. And I think because we are such a young school, it's important to hold on to our identity and, our historical roots and what's been our foundation. I mean, that's why people love visiting those old, Harvards and Vanderbilts and all those schools, because they can go and be like, oh, this person was here back when it was first created. And the art barn is one of those buildings, for us. And so there is so much history here. And it's important that people can come back and feel like, hey, the school hasn't forgotten about me. It hasn't forgotten about what I've done. I don't really think we can get very far by just tearing things down and rebuilding.
When can we expect a decision on behalf of the administration as to what will be done with the art barn?
I don't think I can say. I know that they're meeting about it, they're talking about it, but I don't think there's a set deadline for when a decision's going to be made.
Many students do have different view of what this building is to the university. And I think is a permanent fixture or temporary. They have many differing opinions on it. But this concludes our episode of Line of Fire. We will keep you updated to the status of the art barn, and we'll let you know what the ultimate fate of the building is. I'm Stanley Joseph. Thank you for joining us on Line of Fire.